Hello and good morning, everyone who's already on this call. Thanks so much for joining us today and for joining a little bit early as well. Now, seeing that a few of you already here, I just wanted to make sure that you could hear me and you could also see my screen. A nice purple presentation slide should be able to be what you can see. If you could just confirm that you can hear and see me, that would be fantastic. And the way to do that is just using your question box as part of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you could just type in there and confirm that you can hear and see, that would be awesome. And we can then kick off straight away on the hour. All right, so I might just try that that again now that I can see there's a number of other people that have joined the call. I was just hoping before we kick off on the hour, if someone could just confirm that you can hear me and that you can also see my presentation slides, a nice purple slide deck on your screen there. And the way to do that is just using your GoToWebinar control panel. There's a question box in there, just to confirm and type in there you can see and hear. Excellent, and we've got a couple coming through now. Yes to both, yes and yes. Okay, fantastic, guys. Thanks so much for confirming. Always good to make sure that's the case before we launch into things. So I'm just going to pop myself back on mute for a couple of minutes, and we'll get started on the hour. Thanks very much. All right, hello again, everybody. We've just ticked across to the hour and we've got lots of content to get through. So I am going to kick this webinar session off on eForms, an eForms Masterclass and eForms best practices. So basically today, we're going to explore a subsection of the top 35 operational processes that schools and mats like yours have digitized and offered during 2021 and in preparation for this new academic year. And as I said, in this session, we'll explore and share some top tips and core sort of technical capabilities for delivering best practice digital school forms. We'll then demonstrate some of the most prominent and sort of beneficial real-world use cases we've seen during this calendar year, so that you can see how to replicate those successes at your own school or mat. We'll also introduce and demonstrate the concept of automated workflows, where you can trigger a programmatic chain of actions based on timeframes and the way in which recipients do or do not respond to the forms that you distribute. And time permitting, we'll finish up with a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So this is the third session within our series on the top 35 operational processes to automate in 2021. So you can see the other sessions on your screen at the moment, and we'd love to see you on the other calls as well. And so this is the final session for this week, and we'll be running another set across the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week too, and they're all at 12 p.m. BST to make it nice and easy. We kicked off on Tuesday with a parent workflows webinar that was all about automating parent-facing forms, processes, and communications. Yesterday, we focused on staff workflows, so automating staff forms, processes, approvals, and policy management. And if you did miss those, you can actually go to the same landing page you registered for this session for and sign up for those, and that means we'll automatically distribute you the recording there as well. So today, as I said, is a webinar on eForms, and it's an eForms masterclass, and we'll focus on digitally delivering signable eForms straight to your parents' mobile phones, and also in the recipient's language of choice. And we'll cover a range of different examples from media and COVID testing consents, things like that, to school policy agreements, permission slips, and much more. And then next week, Tuesday the 5th, we've got a session focused on health workflows. So that's managing duty of care, COVID safe processes, incidents and injury reporting, all of that sort of thing. On Wednesday the 6th, we're going to dedicate a session to managing paperless school trips, which is going to be a really great session to get along to. And we're going to wrap up with one on Thursday the 7th, which is on student and public workflows. So that's really all about engaging your whole school community with digital forms and process automation. So from things like student subject selection agreements and activity signups to public workflows, things like volunteer signups, event registration, ticketing, or contactless visitor check-ins, things like that. So we hope we'll see you at some of those as well. And so my name is Lachlan James. I'm Operoo's Head of Marketing. I'm joined today by our UK Sales Director, Tom Owen, who will walk you through today's demonstrations. Now, before we get started properly, just a little bit of housekeeping. As attendees, you are all set to mute to help with audio quality. However, if you do have questions during the webinar, there is a question box in the corner of your screen. So please enter questions into that box and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation and follow up afterwards if we do run short on time. Also, we are recording this session, so everyone who is registered will be sent a link to the recording within the next week. And additionally, all registrants will receive a free copy of Operoo's Best Practice Guide, Top 35 Operations UK Schools Should Automate in 2021. And to develop this resource, we analysed the 200 plus manual tasks and processes and form types we've helped schools automate this calendar year and compiled a summary of the most frequently used and automation worthy. But first, I know there's quite a mix of people on this call, and if you've been on the other webinars, please go and make a coffee for 2 minutes. But there's quite a range. There's some seasoned Operoo users, and there's some schools that are just starting their process automation journey with Operoo, or folks who probably have never heard of Operoo, but are just wondering about how they can look into digitizing and automating their forms and other sort of operational processes at their schools. And so whatever the case is, I do just want to spend a couple of very quick minutes explaining who we are and what we do to provide some context to today's session and outline exactly why we've got the authority to speak on this topic. So Operoo is basically a school operations platform used to automate processes and digitally manage workflows. And essentially, we're helping schools all the way around the UK and throughout the world to eliminate slow, expensive, and repetitive paper-based tasks. And basically, Operoo enables schools to save time and resources by automating these operational tasks that then increase staff productivity, parental engagement, and student participation. And essentially, our goal is to empower schools and MATs to use every minute and every pound possible on student education rather than wasting time on time and resources on operational inefficiencies. So this is a bird's eye view of Operoo in action, and this will make a bit more sense when we go through today's presentation, and Tom shows you some demonstrations as well. But basically, Operoo provides a canvas upon which you can automate any school process, and this is kind of like that journey that things take through the system, a workflow. And so you start with a pre-built template or create your own custom form, request, or piece of communication. You then add any approval workflow steps necessary, enabling certain people to authorize content before its distribution. You then automatically distribute that content to any selected audience, be they parents, staff, or students, based on any known data attributes about specified recipients within the Operoo platform. And as a completely cloud-based and mobile-ready solution, you receive responses within minutes from any device or operating system. You can then trigger follow-up actions based on responses that you've received. Of course, you can securely collect any type of data that you need from things like consents, payments, medical information, or anything else. Automated reminders do the chasing for you until missing information is submitted. And finally, you can track, analyze, and act on responses received with filters, charts, and dashboards. So essentially, Operoo is a school operations and productivity platform that digitizes and streamlines all your slow, repetitive, paper-based or just disconnected processes in one place, from things like multi-language school forms, consents for parents and students, to staff forms and approval workflows, parent communications, payments and ordering, school trip management, medical data collection and verification, and more. And recently, as I said at the top, we sat down and compiled a list of sort of the top 35 processes that schools are automating with Operoo across the UK and throughout Europe as well. And we did this by analysing the 200 plus operational tasks, processes and forms we've helped schools streamline in 2021. Picking out the most common and automation-worthy ones. And here's what that list looks like at a glance. So there's a lot on here, but you've got lots of things from pre-admissions and induction to student medical cards, virtual parent-teacher conference management, request management, event registration, ticketing, consent forms, daily announcements, and much more. And today we're going to focus really on the forms that sit behind all of this and some of the best practices around that. So let's dive into that. So there are kind of 7 different steps to success that I'm going to go through. So, let's get stuck into the specifics, and today's discussion on delivering, best practice digital school forms. And, most schools and MATs today fall into one of 3 categories. They're, still asking students to shove paper forms, and different variations on forms, newsletters, memos, letters, and announcements into their school bags. And, a good percentage of which, inevitably never make it home. Or they're using standalone applications like maybe Google Forms, for example, or a standalone parent comms tool to distribute and collect forms and information, which means chasing, collating, and meaningfully acting on insights gathered remains largely manual and pretty difficult. Or it's kind of a combination of the first 2 scenarios. So today we're going to show you how your fellow schools and MATs are embracing, online forms in combination with dynamic workflows, triggers and smart groups, which Tom will take you through in a live demonstration, to digitally distribute, collect, and automate the transfer of information throughout your school communities. And by pulling these elements together into a single cohesive, digital environment that's programmatically driven and, accessible from anywhere, anytime, via any device, and in any language, schools and MATs are driving higher and faster response rates, deeper insights and better data-based decision-making, all while freeing up staff to conduct more valuable tasks. So we've got 7 top tips and core capabilities we know are essential for delivering best practice digital school forms. So let's dive into it so that I can share those with you now. So today, your school community, is busier, more diverse than ever before. And, what this means for your digital form strategy is 3 primary things. You need a method for ensuring all stakeholders have the same access to the latest information at the same time. So, static or offline methods of data, collection, analysis, and publication through your forms just won't do. Similarly, on-premise or disconnected, digital methods also fall short because, manual interventions are still required to collate, analyze, and act on information gathered through form submissions. So, real-time access and action really is impossible. Secondly, you need to ensure forms can be viewed and completed on any device to facilitate equity and immediacy of information access, as well as, recipient responsiveness. And third, enabling eForm recipients to receive information in their language of choice is critical to ensure equity, access, and participation. So, first up, as I referenced there, ensuring the backbone of a digital forms, framework is cloud-based, really mitigates many of the issues I've just highlighted. At the same time, it delivers immediacy and equity of access for all stakeholders, facilitates, anytime responsiveness, and makes, up to the minute information and analysis possible. And, in conjunction with the 24/7 access to real-time information, there's lots of other good reasons to embrace the cloud as well. So here there are 8 core reasons, managed services in the cloud are the way to go in order to form, the backbone of your digital school forms and process automation efforts. Independent research suggests that human error causes 90% of all data breaches, and so getting this sort of thing into the cloud and out of people's hands is actually a far safer way to go. And not only is it much more secure than paper or on-premise methods of form-based information dissemination, collation, access, and storage, it's much easier to adhere to data privacy and security regulations such as GDPR as well. And we'll touch on this in a little bit more detail later on. So, cloud-based systems are also far more efficient because managed service providers take the burden off you and your team so that the total cost of ownership is much lower. In fact, a recent market research report by analyst firm Technavio found that the low cost of ownership is one of the major factors driving the global cloud computing market in the K-12 education sector. So the firm predicts that the global computing market in the K-12 education sector is going to register a compound annual growth rate of more than 27% between 2018 and 2022. So over this 4 or 5 year period that we're in the middle of now. And this really shouldn't be a surprise, as you're likely already moving towards managed services in the cloud for your other IT needs at your school. And according to a recent survey by Extreme Networks, today 94% of education institutions are already hosting at least one major operational solution in the cloud. And some prominent examples, of course, include email, learning management systems, and student information systems as well. And finally, cloud-based applications are highly reliable due to their scalability, easily handling usage peaks and traffic spikes caused by specific events. So being cloud-based, we know, is really important no matter what technology you're specifically using. But in 2021, it's not enough to be online and in the cloud. You also need to ensure, the digital communication tactics and processes that underpin your forms, need to be available on any device or operating system. And so, a couple of points here to underpin this. Today over 92% of the UK's total population have a smartphone, and that percentage nears total saturation amongst our adult population. And it's adults with school-age children that actually spend the most amount of time on their phones too, as we can see from this chart. So your parents are actually the perfect demographic, for mobile-based communications and form delivery. But with operating system usage evenly split across the UK between iOS and Android, you'll want to ensure that you're enabling a consistent user experience across any mobile platform or device. So that's really important. No matter who you're working with and what you're doing, it needs to be accessible no matter what device and no matter what operating system that device is using. Now, thirdly, in conjunction with the accessibility considerations that come from being cloud-based and mobile ready, your parent community has also become far more ethnically diverse, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. And this trend is only accelerating. So the ability to automatically enable parents and anyone at your school for that matter to access digital forms in their language of choice is critical to ensure understanding and responsiveness to any form type for any purpose that you're distributing. And according to the latest data from statistics.gov.uk, over 19% of pupils in UK schools have a first language other than English, just to underscore this point and the importance. And this percentage rises again in the context of primary schools. So across the UK, around 21% of primary school students learn English as an additional language or dialect. And just to demonstrate, some of the benefits of implementing these systematic, best practices when it comes to digital school forms. I want to highlight some of the great work and experiences of Bootham School, who we're working with. So based in York, they've done some fantastic work regarding school trip automation specifically. And one of the key aspects of this successful rollout was the results they were able to achieve by automating excursion consent forms. And I want to pick up on 3 critical data points from their results, which are all related to the impact of adhering, to the cloud, mobile, and multi-language best practices that we've just discussed. So firstly, they've reduced the number of paper consent forms used per trip from 400 plus to 0, which is obviously fantastic. Most trip consent forms are now signed and submitted within just 24 hours. This used to be something that took weeks. And by automating the distribution, collection, and collation of these forms, they've reduced the resources that they need to plan school trips by at least 50%. So some really outstanding outcomes there by embracing some digital school form best practices. And this is what James Ratcliffe, the assistant head at Bootham School, had to say about that experience. And James says, today we can digitally distribute a trip consent form in Opera and have the majority signed and returned within 24 hours. Previously, this sort of response rate was simply unheard of and unachievable. Nobody's chasing paper forms anymore. It's taken really substantial volumes of repetitive work away from teachers and admin staff. It's cut down admin time from a trip by at least half. For example, my assistant Claire can now put increased effort into more valuable activities, such as helping me develop better risk assessments for school trips. I think that's really what it's all about. It's about repurposing your time and doing things that are far more valuable. All right, point 2 of our 7. Are your forms fit for purpose? So a few things to think about here. This is what we mean by fit for purpose. What's the role each form or form type needs to fulfill, and in what context? What are the types of audiences you're sending and receiving these forms to? And what's the type of data you're requesting and collecting? So you've got to think about the answers to all of those, and you've got to make sure that you've got an approach and a solution that can meet all those needs. So let's start with the role and context of your forms. There's 2 predominant modes of delivering, digital forms: is push and pull. And to meet your audience's needs, you'll need to have the ability to deliver both of these. So the first type are known as self-service forms, which are kind of those pull forms. So these are types of forms that you set up and enable certain audiences to access at any stage and use on multiple occasions. And so good examples here include things like staff reimbursement requests, sick leave applications, maybe student behavior reports, and so on. So things that people can go and use anytime that they want to and will be used again and again. The other main type that you need to be able to enable and think about how you're going to deliver are known as push forms. So push forms are distributed directly to specific recipients at a specific time for a specific one-off purpose. So you want to use these for things like collecting consents for a certain school trip, attaining acknowledgements for a new school policy update, or maybe verifying student medical information before a sports carnival. Things of that nature. Next up, whatever solution you use to underpin your digital forms initiative, you need to have a high degree of flexibility. So you need this so that you can create and customize forms to suit your school or match specific needs, as well as the multiplicity of different use cases. So from typical consent forms to things like questionnaires, surveys, payment requests, even newsletters, memos, letters, announcements, a big list there. You need to be able to include, all the fields, types of allowable or required responses that you need, which, and for any purpose or for any reason. So there's the different types of forms, and then there's the different types of functionality within those forms that you need to consider. And that all needs to be customizable and flexible. So, static form types and rigid templates will leave you really constrained and facing significant rework. So, for example, when the data you need to collect invariably changes with new policies, protocols, and expectations, you've got a lot of rework on your hands. And so as an example, at Opera, we do also try and strike a bit of a balance here by offering a really large range of fully customizable best practice school templates, school form templates out of the box, so that the schools and mats we work with don't have to build everything from scratch, and they've kind of got the best of both worlds. But really important to think about no matter who you're working with. The next thing you need to consider is your varied audience types, and to be able to deliver different types of forms to suit each one of those audiences. So you need to be able to match up certain functional attributes within your forms to meet the needs of different groups of people. So some of these core audience types are included on this slide. So from your parents and staff to students and even third parties who aren't direct members of your school community or registered users within your school's solutions and admin systems. And I'll give you a few examples of what I'm talking about here. So schools regularly run events such as theatre productions or music performances that are ticketed and attended by third parties such as students, grandparents, extended family, friends, things like that. So you need to ensure that the same digital forms framework that you use for, I guess, your typical things can collect information from these third parties and collate it in a consistent manner alongside the information collected from parents, staff, and students, your sort of registered known members of your school community. And similarly, you need to be able to give a hierarchical access to different users within the same audience groupings. So as an example, certain staff members should be able to review and approve form submissions or alter and add content where required. So think the digital equivalent of office only fields. So things like that, you need to think about how that's going to be managed in a digital environment. So next, you need to ensure you're able to reach your audience, your audiences wherever they are and whenever needed. So to fulfill this need, it's important that your digital forms can be distributed via multiple methods. So via email, SMS, in-application, notifications, just to name a few. And the importance of multiple distribution and reminder methods for pushing forms to people, will become clearer a little later on when we start talking about how digital forms fit into multi-step workflows. And there's a couple of charts we'll take you through there. But for now, let's consider this scenario that's, I guess, particularly time sensitive. So there'll be lots of different ones. But for example, it's the morning of a school camp, and hopefully they're all returning soon with a bit of normality resuming into school life. And for parents are in the middle of dropping off students to board buses from 9 a.m. But however, there's maybe a last minute parental consent that's required for the campus to participate in a new activity. And being able to notify parents via SMS could be the difference between a great camp experience or a really frustrating one, as an example. But of course, there are emergency situations and things as well where you need that immediacy. So those different ways of being able to push forms to people and really relate that to what are the immediacy needs are in that particular situation, and so you can get those responses when you need to. And finally, embedding forms in third-party web platforms, so things like your school website, is important for more complex use cases. So, we talked about third parties and public, the public before. So, as an example, you might want to be able to enable prospective parents to sign up to school tours, but they, of course, won't yet have access to your school systems. So, in today's demonstration, Tom will show you some examples for engaging third parties who sit outside your school's immediate community, but an important consideration there. Next, ensuring you have the ability to collect multiple data types within the one form and system. So, for example, when organising a school excursion, you shouldn't be using one form or multiple form solutions for collecting parental consents, student medical data, and payments. Those different things. Ensuring that you can collect, for example, payment and consent information within the one form and platform avoids really messy double handling or manual reconciliation, so that permissions and payments can automatically be collated and associated to specific students. And because if requested and collected separately, you're left tediously and manually matching consents and payments to the right individuals and the right activity. And it's a needlessly tedious, repetitive, and disjointed experience for staff and parents alike. And lastly, within this section, you need to consider how your system for digital school forms securely protects the data that you are collecting. So again, bringing back to that point that I mentioned before, using a managed service provider to host your digital forms and process automation efforts in the cloud really drastically reduces the risk of data security and privacy breaches. Unlike manual on-premise or paper-based processes, manual service providers have to adhere to the rigorous policies and procedures that are put in place by regulators and governments, in regard to how they manage your data. Simply put, they're held to a much higher standard. And in the UK, a couple of examples that cloud-based MSPs are required to comply with are things like the Privacy Act, Notifiable Data Breach Scheme, and the latest the Data Protection Act. And if operating in the UK and Europe, managed service providers must also comply with GDPR, of course, which simultaneously ensures that your school's digital forms are also GDPR compliant. Really important. Aside from complying with industry regulations, you need to ensure that the form field types and underpinning functional capabilities such as data encryption and user password protection, things like that, are in place so that you can securely collect sensitive data with confidence. So that's things like digital signatures and consents, medical and health information, as well as digital payments. So to finish this section, here's a quick case study example from Elizabeth College, who have been able to experience the benefits of applying the best practices we've spent some time talking through so far. So Elizabeth College has been able to automate the distribution and collection of forms across its school, really reducing staff workload, safeguarding data security, and increasing the reliability of student medical information, all while providing a seamless user experience for their parents. So they've had a really good, lots of really good outcomes here. And this is a quote from Joe, the IT manager, and he says, "We can now build and distribute any form type in minutes, automatically associate submitted data to each student profile, and reduce the load on parents and staff by requesting information once and having it universally accessible to authorized users all year round." So some really, really important outcomes there through adhering to some of those best practices. All right, number 3, automated segmentation of your different audience types. So, as we all know on this call, schools really, they run on groups, from classes to year levels, music programs, sport teams, debating clubs, and many more. And delivering and requesting the right information to people associated with these groups represents an area of significant recurring effort. So having an automated way to ensure that parents, as well as staff or students, receive and submit required information through their forms, things like consents, medical details, payments, as they move in or out of a group, is a critical part of your digital forms strategy. So Tom will demonstrate how smart groups and smart forms in Operoo can move people in and out of certain recipient groups based on information provided or other known data attributes about those audience members a little bit later on. So for example, if certain students have indicated that they're asthmatic, and the ability to segment your audience is fundamentally linked to our next point, so targeted messaging. So this may sound really obvious, but bear with me. So, are you, as an example of a different form type, are you still sending a newsletter to absolutely everyone at your school? So, does that content, that's within the newsletter really merit global distribution to your entire school community? For example, everyone needs to know about a sudden school closure, but does everyone really need to know that little Jimmy Smith came third in under 14s athletics? Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against Jimmy personally, and fully acknowledge that celebrating, success as an important part of building strong community connections and inclusivity at your school. But, personalizing messages is important too, and to ensure relevancy and attentiveness as part of your on the part of your recipients. So you want to make sure that obviously you've got a really engaged audience when you're sending out your forms. And in fact, in a landmark survey of almost 2,000 respondents, and this is actually conducted by the Center for American Progress, it was found that when it came to the usefulness and value that school stakeholders place on communications, individualization was the most important factor. And these findings are also reflected in similar, smaller UK-based studies as well. So the ability to personalize is really important so that people don't tune out basically, and they stay engaged with what you're distributing. And then another quote here, again, from Joe, the IT manager at Elizabeth College, and he says, "With Operoo, the need for a huge amount of continuous manual effort disappeared. Returned forms are automatically attached to each individual student profile and grouped by year level, class, activity, medical condition, or any chosen data attribute. That's the massive difference for us." All right, number 4 on our list of top capabilities for facilitating digital school form best practices is requests and approval workflows. And the point is this, you can't know exactly when someone will make a request, but you can anticipate which types will be made often and who needs to approve those requests. And by planning for such occurrences and establishing uniform methods for dealing with them, you can avoid spending undue time dealing with them on an ad hoc basis, while ensuring consistent, reliable, repeatable outcomes. So the ability to associate system-based approval workflows with certain form types is a really critical capability. But I guess here's a bit of a word of warning on those sort of automated approval workflows and automation in general from Bill Gates. And he says, the first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So, be sure that your paper and manual processes, or just you disconnected ones you try to consolidate, make good sense. And if they could, actually use improvement, use your digital forms and approval, workflow journey, as that opportunity to really improve them before you digitize them and set them live. So number 5, data management. Manual methods of data entry, storage, sharing, and analysis are, enormous time killers in schools. And so, this problem only multiplies as the size of schools grow and the complexity of requirements, relating to, safe data storage and privacy only increase. So you need to really think about how this is going to be done effectively and efficiently in the context of your, school forms initiative. So on this front, it's imperative that you have a universal place where data submitted from your digital forms is collected and accessible. Otherwise, collating that information is enormously time consuming, fraught with security risks, and inhibits your ability to easily track, find, and use that information that you've spent time collecting. That's why standalone and ad hoc solutions, things like Google Forms, are really hazardous and inefficient for the use within the context of schools. Now, another example here. So Feltham College took its school trip management process from a resource-intensive paperwork calamity, as they put it, to a really seamless digital experience, whilst giving staff their time back, improving data security, as well as enhancing the school's ability to efficiently meet its duty of care obligations 24/7. And the digital forms they had underpinning this played a key role in those outcomes that I just went through there. And as the results they've achieved, that they are really fantastic and they really do speak for themselves. So a couple of things to pinpoint here from what you can see on the screen. They no longer need to chase parents for missing information. Obviously a big tick there. They have one source of truth for all student medical data and emergency contact information that they collect, and anyone can access that same view of that information anytime on any device. And the way that that has been collected and the way that that is stored and accessible is 100% GDPR compliant. So really important outcomes there. And just a quote from Phil Rayner, the school business manager at Feltham College. And he says, before Operoo, everything was recorded on paper. This had several undesirable consequences. Not only did we have no ability to reuse information gathered, and so ask for the same information every time we held a school trip or activity, we were also unable to store it securely in one accessible place. Now, all authorised parents and staff can access the same universal source of truth from one digital platform, anywhere, anytime, and from any device, even when offline. So some really important real-world outcomes there. Okay, so the next step in this data management, I guess, journey, and why it's really important, why you have to think about it, in regards to, the effective management of the information you collect from your school forms initiative, is reporting and analytics. So, if you're able to effectively store information captured in a universally accessible place, you'll achieve a number of really important things. You'll have superior visibility and data completeness. And in turn, what this then lets you do is you'll get superior insights, which then facilitate reliable reporting. And Reliable reporting, in turn, facilitates better data-based decision making. So some really important flow-on effects there, because after all, you're not just collecting information from forms for the sake of it. You're going to do something with that information, and we'll build on that concept shortly as well when we think about workflows and how forms fit into that context. So I'm picking on Joe a little bit today, but they've done some really good work. So again, Joe from Elizabeth College says that distributing, tracking, and analyzing responses became one-click functions when they started working with us, while automated reminders now chase parents for us. So, some really important outcomes there again. So, they're not spending time manually crunching data and analyzing when it comes in. That's literally now a click of a button, so they can track and monitor information for certain forms they've requested, and then go and actually analyze and produce some decent insights about that information that they can then go and do some smarter decision making with. Now, if you don't have, if you don't enable an integrated data experience, the quality and comparability of data collected via your digital forms, will always be compromised. And like marketing automation programs, which connect to an organization's CRM to ensure data consistency, you need to consider how your digital forms integrate with other systems of record within your school. So this was really important for Allerton High, who we've worked with specifically around their pre-admissions. And that was all about creating, an automated experience so that, they could streamline the whole experience, automatically induct new students once they're admitted, and instantly sync data back into the management information system, SIMS. So that was really important, that integrated data experience. And Gary, the data manager, says this: that the Opera SIMS integration is an all-round game changer for processing pre-admissions data. It automatically pulls across all dietary and medical data captured during pre-admissions and syncs it with the student record in SIMS upon acceptance. Not only does this save time, it reduces risk by ensuring we have a single trustworthy version of the truth for managing emergency situations. So that integrated experience between systems is really important. Okay, I promise, nearly getting over to Tom now. So next, programmatically, responding to change with data-driven categorization of people. So you might remember that in one of the previous sections of this presentation, we identified that managing groups from classes to sports teams, things like that, was a great area to automate within your school and to, automate within your school forms initiative. So if you do this, what you'll find is that staff, students, and parents automatically receive and submit required information, consents, medical details, things like that, much faster as they move in and out of groups. And if you can get this right, the reduction in ongoing manual effort really is enormous. And automation is critical to delivering on that audience segmentation, message tailoring, and frequency objectives of your digital forms initiative that we sort of talked through. And with Opera, you can easily define the actions that should be triggered when a form is submitted. And based on the responses and the data received, you can automatically send emails, add tags to students and staff, add people to groups, or send them other forms. So, other organizations have been embracing and refining, marketing and communications automation for the last decade. And really, it's high time that schools look to the benefits offered by automation when it comes to the way that they interact and communicate, and especially the way that they distribute and collect information via forms. And again, Gary from Allerton, just on this point, he had a really great quote that kind of sums this up. And he says, "We've saved hundreds of hours, thousands of pounds, and a lot of heartache. I am so happy and amazed with our pre-admissions process now. We have completely removed all paper from the new starters' parents' experience. We send out all forms digitally." And this next bit is crucial. Opera saves us loads of time as the system triggers next steps in the workflow, subsequent communications, and does the chasing for us. And then, automation, it's got some really important benefits. Firstly, that the messages and information distributed are reliable. Your parents will enjoy a consistent experience, and that experience is known and transparent. But the consistency of automation doesn't just apply to and benefit the forms you distribute. You can also apply automation to the way in which your audiences are segmented and the way that data from or about them is collected, ensuring the right people are receiving the right messages as well. Secondly, all this means that you can reallocate time and resources once spent on recurring manual tasks. And this allows you to become increasingly sophisticated in your digital forms and communication strategy and execution. Now we fully appreciate that working in a school can sometimes feel like survival of the fittest, but like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll never reach those higher level outcomes if you're overwhelmed by the day-to-day basics. All right, and I'm just going to move ahead with an eye on the clock to the last point here. So all of this has kind of been building up to this point here, where you need to, finally, you need to start thinking and shifting your mindset around what school forms are and what they do. So digitizing your forms and automating associated actions is important, but once you've done so, it's time to stop thinking about individual forms and more about the workflows they support. So that is, think about the information, next steps, and outcomes you're looking to achieve by distributing and collecting data via forms in the first place. So really, this comes down to this key concept of if this, then that. So once you've collected information from someone, or maybe you haven't yet, what do you want to happen next? What is the next step that you want to happen? And making sure that you set up a workflow that can actually programmatically trigger those things to happen automatically, to really reduce the manual effort associated, with the information you collect and disseminate with school forms. And at this point, I am going to hand over to Tom.
Lovely, thanks, Lachlan. I'm going to change myself to presenter so we can see my screen. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Lachlan. There's some really great content in there and kind of lots and lots of detail about these best practices for managing all of these processes. What I wanted to do today was to show you building out a process within Operoo, but I thought I'd give you an example to start off with of something which we've seen a lot of our schools take up and use within Operoo. This particular workflow we have on screen right now is built around identifying send requirements as part of an admissions process. So very basically, as part of an admissions form, we have some questions on send requirements. Based on those requirements, what do we want to happen? And this comes back to what are the end goals we want from that process. And what I want from the process within my demo school here is that our Senko is notified of that particular requirement. The Senko needs to review that information and decide whether they already have the information on that particular student or whether that parent or that student requires an interview. Automatically, based on that, an interview request is sent to the parent if that's what's required. They book a time. The interview is confirmed with them. An interview form is available for staff to be able to complete as part of that process, and once that's completed, the parent is sent feedback. If we've already got their requirements, then all of our other actions will automatically take place, or they'll take place after the interview. So that's things like if you have local authority forms you need to complete, they're completed. They're moved to a specific group within the system. Parents are automatically informed of schools' protocols depending on requirements. Teaching staff are updated, and all of those forms are saved against that individual student in a digital filing cabinet. And this uses a lot of different Operoo tools to get there. So we have a set of different forms throughout the process. We've got approvals, so yes or no decisions within that process. We also have tags and other triggers within the system to be able to manage and move this through a school. And we've got a series of communications which move around, and all of this is triggered off that initial single data point within an admissions form about a specific requirement for a specific child. But it's not just these theoretical examples which we have. Bishopsgate School is something which we've talked about in some of the other webinars this week, but they've built out a very specific workflow with Operoo, which was how they managed their COVID bubbles and their COVID notifications should anyone test positive. That case study is available on our website. I would urge you to have a look at it and look at this really advanced workflow which they've been able to build through Operoo. Okay, at this stage, what I want to do is jump over to a live Operoo system and let's build out a workflow and show you how that can work. It's worth saying at the outset, and I think Lachlan's kind of emphasized this throughout, that what we're going to show you today is an example. Operou's tools make it really easy for you to build your own workflows and processes to your requirements. I'm going to build out a process for a flu vaccination form. It might well be that this is a process you have in school or something similar in school. It might be something you don't do at all, but we're going to look at the tools which sit behind this and can be used across processes in schools using Operou. Let's start by looking at the form itself. I'm going to jump to another tab. Now, normally I'd be showing you at the outset an Operou form, and we will do that later, but this is an example, a local NHS trust has sent a school a PDF which needs to be completed by all parents for all students. This can be a real pain for schools because either we have to go in and print out and send these forms home, or alternatively, we email this form out as a PDF and then we have to chase the responses, make sure people have filled in the right information. If we're doing it through that method, also you're then relying on your parents at home having a printer to print it out and fill it in, or using add-ons and different systems to be able to access and fill in this PDF. Then when the responses come back in, we need to see what each bit of data that parent needs based on their response. We have to segment these students into different groups, make sure the right students have the right information, and make sure the right information is then passed to the NHS. It's all massively manual, time consuming, and a huge pain for everyone involved in what is quite a simple form. You'll also notice on page 2 of our form, so about half of the form which needs completed needs to be completed by the NHS, who are going to be doing that on the day. So this is another area which can cause huge confusion for parents. You know, do they have to fill in bits of information? Who needs to fill in these things? And particularly for our parents with English as an additional language, what do I need to fill in? What do I need to do? So let's make it simple for them. And let's see how we can manage this in Operou. I'm going to jump over to Operou now. This is the administration side of Operou. So this is not what a parent sees. This is what you see as an administrator. And I'm going to start with a form which we made earlier, mapping off the form we just looked at. So I've got a flu immunization consent form, which I can open up and have a look at. Now, you'll see that this is specifically designed, and this was a form which I built for this webinar, which has field by field exactly the same data which that NHS form required. So all of the different field types which we need for that NHS form were all in there. And we'll come back and have a look at that a little bit later on. It's worth saying at this point that once I'd created that form, I got one of our customer success team, specifically Amanda Walsh, for anyone on the phone call who know her. I got her to map this to the specific NHS provided form. So if you're an existing Operou customer or Operou user who wants to replicate this kind of process with a specific PDF, do get in contact with your customer success manager or our support team to discuss how you can do it. Okay, so we've created this form with all of these different fields. Now, we're going to have a look at this mapping and some other things we want to do with that form a little bit later, but there were lots of questions on here which we might want to trigger some follow-up actions for. Specifically, there's one which I'm going to pick. If there's one question which was in here, which was, if I go down here past these things, whether the child has received the flu vaccination since September this year. So if they've already received the flu vaccination, what do we want to do? I'm going to come back to our student view, and I'm going to create a follow-up form for that specific scenario. I'm going to come in and create a new form, and I'm going to create that form for a parent. And I'm just going to start a completely blank form. There's various ways we can start Operou forms, including some of our best practice templates, but I'm going to start a new form. I'm just going to create a custom unsigned form. Now, there we go. Oh, sorry, I created a custom signed form. I wanted a custom unsigned form. Let's go back. Custom unsigned form. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to create this particular form and call it Confirmation of Immunisation Flu 2021. I'm going to ask our parents to complete this for their particular child using one of our placeholders. Now we're into our form builder. So I've got a series of questions which I can ask based on these specific criteria. So I want a yes/no question just to say, I confirm that my child has received their immunisation. I want to know the date of that immunisation. I want to know, again, let's put in a single choice question, the type of immunisation, and we've got whether they received a nasal one or an injection, and we'll remove that option. Then I need to know what I want to do is add in an attachment request. I'm going to make this attachment request optional because you might want to add this in or not, but I'm going to ask for some supporting documents, some proof that that immunisation has happened, and I'm going to add in a yes/no question. This yes/no question at the end is going to be purely for our office team, our admin team in school, to say, has the proof been received that this particular immunisation has taken place, yes or no? And I'm going to make this an office use only form. Then I'm going to save. And right now I'm going to leave this as static member. Actually, let's make this a dynamic. Let's make this dynamic. So who do we want this particular form to go to? Well, this particular form, we want it to go to anybody who answered that they've already had that immunisation. So I'm going to go to our Eform Responses. I'm going to go to our flu consent form, the one we just looked at. I'm going to go to answers to questions, and in there I can tick that if they're in my school and they've said that they've had that immunisation, then they're automatically going to receive that form. So this is an example of a smart form. If you've given us that bit of information, you automatically get that form. And then I can say, when do we need our response by? Let's say next week. How often am I going to remind my parent that they've got to fill it in? Let's say every day, and we'll enable that form. And then that form is live. So then if I give that response to that form, I'm automatically going to get the second form. So we will come back to that later on. But before we look at our main form and our main form setup, I'm going to show you some smart groups. Let's head back to students. And we can see here, I've got my groups down here. I've got my flu immunisation, and I've got a series of groups which I've already created. But I want to create an additional group in here. To do that, I can come in and add a group, and I'm going to call this group already received immunisation. Again, I'm going to use Operu's dynamic filters to decide who's going to be part of that group. And I'm going to choose a specific filter based on, again, an eForm response. This time I'm going to use the form we just created, and I'm going to use an answer to a question, and I'm going to use our office use only answer in here. So once a member of the admin team confirms that they've received that proof, then yes, automatically, let's put that in there, then they're going to become part of that group. And again, we'll save. Now, one thing I did want to do, actually, I want to put that under our flu immunisation group. Let's put that flu immunisation group. Is it gone? There we go. So that's housed under there. Now, the last thing I want to do in this setup is I want to make all of this data available to a member of staff. So I'm going to find the member of staff who's running this program for us in school, and I'm going to give them access to the whole of our flu immunisation group so they can see all of that data and all of those responses and who's in those separate groups. So they've got access to them. Now, let's go back to our original vaccination form and pull all of this together. Let's find our form again. There we go, our flu immunisation consent form. Okay, I'm happy with all of our questions and our setup in here. I'll come down to the bottom of our form. Let's give it a second. There we go. I'll come down to the bottom of our form and move on to the next stage, which is I want to decide who this is going to, and this is already set up to go to our flu immunisation group, but we could set it up to go to the whole school. If we needed different routes and distinct routes for example, children with asthma, we could set that up based on existing information we have on that student. But let's set this up to go to everybody. We'll save that. Then we've got a number of settings within this, but again, I'll just fill out a couple. When do we need a response by? Let's say next Tuesday. How often am I going to remind that parent that they've got to fill in that form? Let's say every day, and we'll save. We then get into our triggers. So this is down to what do you want to happen based on any specific detail. Now, in this particular setup, any data field we can use to submit a specific question. But let's set up a couple of different examples. For example, if I have given, so this signature of parent guardian is me saying yes to a nasal spray. If I've said yes to this, then we can, let's send an email. We could send an email, we could add or remove tags, we could add people to groups or additional forms. We've got various different things we can do to manage this process. But I want to send an email. I want to send an email to the parent. And that email is going to say something really simple like confirmation. Thanks for confirming that your child will be receiving the nasal flu immunisation in this school year. This year, our date for the nasal flu immunisation is Friday, the 8th of October, and I'll create that trigger. So what that means is automatically, once I submit that detail, I'm automatically going to be sent a confirmation to say, thanks for booking it. This is the time of this particular immunisation. Now, if I save this form, we can see what this form looks like. We can see the details of it, but I'm just going to try and bring my mobile up onto screen just to show you. As that parent, straight away, there we go. As that parent, straight away, I will have been sent an email or a push notification to tell me I have a new form to fill in. I have a new form to complete. And I'm logging into the Operu app here. I can see as this parent, I've got various things which I need to complete, including a trip and a parent-teacher meeting and my lateral flow test reminder. But straight away, there we go, this Operu form is available to me. I've got to complete it by the 5th of October. I've got to complete all of those details in a nice Operu form, which we saw earlier. Now, when I complete this information, let's come out of there. When I complete this information, if I go to our form library as an administrator, what I then see is I've got my confirmation. Actually, let's find the correct form. There we go, our flu immunisation consent form. So all of this data comes in and can be analysed. So we can see any particular information which we want to see from any of these data fields. We can see all the data in one place. We can see who's responded, who's not responded. If a parent does print out something and bring it into you, you can come in and respond on their behalf. But crucially, when it comes to the time when your immunisations are going to take place, whether on an individual basis, we can download mapped PDFs of data. This will take a second. Or en masse, we can export all of our responses in one place. So I'm just giving this a second. There we go. And what that's going to do is every bit of detail which has been filled in by that parent onto that form is then mapped to the specific PDF. All the things are put in, everything is signed how we want it to have it signed, and we can pass that information on to the NHS. Also, whoever is managing this in school, if I go to that member of staff, that member of staff has got access to a group which has got all of our details, all of our information in one place. And I'm incredibly conscious of time, but one more thing which I was going to show you within that process is that you can also set up a reminder, which a lot of our schools will do. A day before that immunisation is due to take place, I get a notification via email or via our news feed that this is what's happening in school. This is the information you need as a parent. All of this can happen automatically based on that specific initial form. We can build this whole workflow around this structure. And what this ends up looking like is something like this. We have that initial form. Depending which stream you go down, whether you're already, if you've already received your immunization, you ask for proof of that, and then you go on to our next stage. If you say yes, parents sent reminders at a frequency you set, and then they move on to our final stages. And if you say no, that detail is just moved on to our final stages. Those final stages are that NHS form is mapped. So straight away, all that data is available in a really nice format for your NHS staff who are coming in to do your immunisations. They're moved into the correct groups, specific groups with specific time parameters around those groups. The right teaching staff are informed, and all of those forms are saved against a student record within Operoo. So there's a digital filing cabinet for each student with all of that detail. Now, I'm aware we've gone slightly past the hour, but I have seen that there's been some questions coming in as we've gone through that process and talked about those workflows. But I will just say one thing before we move on to our Q&A, is that this process for most of our schools was incredibly manual, but very quickly using Operoo becomes automated. It's easier for parents to complete that information, easier for office staff as they don't have to print and send copies or manually chase those respondents. Those running it in school have got all the information they need. And as I said at the start, this is one process. Operoo has hundreds of templates for different processes, but whatever your process is, they can be automated within Operoo. So at this point, we are a couple of minutes past. So thank you for your patience in sticking around and staying with us. I have seen some questions coming in, but I'm going to bring Lachlan back at this point as well.
Hey, g'day, Tom. Thank you for taking us through that. Sorry, I left you a little bit short on time for that demo, mate, but I think you did a sterling job nonetheless. There's a question here just around. So, I mean, hopefully, if you've turned up, you're going to learn something. Hopefully, you've learned something irrespective of which sort of specific tools and things that you're using, but some things to think about when you're trying to apply some of those best practices to your digital school forms initiatives. But there are some questions here about pricing. So I just wanted to say, and so how is Operoo priced? So look, basically it's a per student per annum pricing model. But if you are interested in working with us and you're not already, we will get back to you, but just if you want to type into the question box now something like price, quote, something like that, so we know that that's you and you're interested, we'll be able to get back to you with some specific details. So I just want to call that out now off the top. And then there are a couple of questions here that always are about recordings. So yes, we are recording today's session. You will get a copy of that. You will get a copy of the slides as well, because there's quite a lot to them. So you will get all of those different types of materials. Tom, there is a question here about multi-language school forms and how many languages does Operoo include within its platform? So I think I know the answer if you don't.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something which actually I meant to bring up within the demo, but cut because of time. I will just show you. So I've still got my flu immunization form in here. Basically, any language which your parents are going to have, there is auto translation within that setup. So let's say as a parent, my native language is Greek. That's how I want to receive this particular form and information. If I go into my flu immunization form, then that form and my questions are now in Greek. So it's designed to make it really easy for your parents to be able to engage and access whatever data you want them to complete, knowing it's going to map back to those right fields. And there's well over 100 languages within there that you can that your parents can do, and that's all user defined as well. Parent decides what language they want the system in, and then they can complete that information accordingly.
Yep, no, beautiful. Thank you very much, Tom. And then from last count, I think we had 103 different languages
Lovely.
that do the translating the system. So it's a super rare day that we can't meet the needs of your community in that regard. There was just a question around different operating systems and things, and so I think I covered a bit of this at the start, but depending on when you came into the session, yes, basically you can distribute and access forms on any web-enabled device. And really any operating system. So iOS, Android, even if there's the odd person out there using a different, like a Windows-based something these days, not many of you, but there is a mobile browser version through which you can access the system. So basically any device will do in that regard. And I did also mention briefly, but we didn't really emphasize it much, but you can also access information that's already been cached in offline mode as well. So probably something more for, I guess, the staff than users than for parents. But if you're staffing a school trip or something like that, basically all the forms and things that have been submitted and verified in regards to something like student medical and emergency information, you can make sure that you have all of those and that those form submissions downloaded on your Opera app on your phone, and so you can actually go and click into those and see those details and act on that information in case of emergency, even if you're in a mobile black spot. So I just thought I'd mention that because I think that's a pretty important one going on there. There is a question here around how does the mapping of a form work? Do we have to print them all out in the end? So no, you don't have to print them out. You can if you wanted to. Tom, did you want to talk to that one a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the mapping of the forms themselves, what we've seen is it kind of depends on which third party you're working with. So certain NHS trusts and certain local authorities and things like that, some require a printed copy. The example which I flagged up earlier, I know when this kind of form was used, it was printed out because that's what the local trust wanted, and then they filled out that extra information. But you can still send that digitally onto third parties if they will accept it, which we've seen with some local authorities. But if you're an existing Opera user, I would say speak to your customer success manager. They'll be able to talk you through kind of what's possible, help you with mapping, help you set up some example forms as well.
Yep, no, absolutely. So I know we're sort of a few minutes past, and most of you have stuck around, which is fantastic. I don't see any more questions coming through at this point, guys. So I guess it will probably move to wrap up, but I've got the question box open in a screen. So if you do have a question and you want to jump in quickly, please feel free to do so. But I guess moving on to the conclusion of today's chat, again, thanks so much for your time and for joining us. But this has been the third in a series of 6 webinars. So as I said, next week on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all at 12 p.m. BST. We've got another 3 webinars that I'm really hoping to see a lot of you at as well. One is dedicated to health workflows, one is around managing paperless school trips, and the other is around student and public workflows. So that's form types and processes and things that you send to students directly to give them a student voice and a direct contribution to things. And then public workflows is really about those third parties that I mentioned, so people that aren't direct members of your school community, enabling them to be able to submit information and do things like sign up for school fates or working bees or music days or anything like that as well. So hoping to see you there. Next, if we can, please, Tom. Excellent. And we talked through a number of different case studies. Obviously, we work with schools right across the UK. We've got some in Europe and Asia Pacific and the US as well. But we talked about a number of different use cases, and we do have a number of great case studies. And so if you go to our website and you click the Customers tab, there is a Case Studies sub tab within that, and you can click on that and see a bunch of great case studies, many of which we referenced on today's call. And then also, if you go to the Resources tab on our website, from the homepage, you'll be able to go to webinars and videos and see some that are associated with those case studies that we've mentioned. So there's the Allerton one, which is all around pre-admissions, which is really good view, if I don't say so myself. There's one all around staff processes that we do with Bishopsgate School, and that's an interview-based webinar as well. So you get to hear directly from the horse's mouth there. And there's a good session that we held about 4 or 5 months ago around paperless school trips. And so we are going to have a similar session that's going to be live next week, which we encourage you to come along to. But there is that recording there that you can access through the videos and webinars tab on our website. All right, and finally, as I said, we will send you the recording. We have been recording today's session, and we will follow up with a copy of the presentation slides, as well as that best practice guide around the top 35 operational processes to automate in 2021. So we'll follow up with the recording, the slides, and that guide. We'll all package that up to you after this session. But if you did want to reach out to us in the meantime, please feel free to do so. And the easiest way to do that is through our website. And so if you just go to operoo.com/contact sales, there's a little form to fill out there. And in all likelihood, that'll probably be Tom who will get straight back to you. So if you want to reach out to us in the meantime, please do so, and we'd be happy to hear from you. But that is it for today's session. Again, we really appreciate your time and your company. Hopefully we'll see you at next week's sessions as well. And yeah, we've really enjoyed your company today. So bye for now.